Dan, Ray, it's great that you could join us here today for this exciting topic. For those who don't know, Dan is a Group Executive of Technology and Data at AXX. Ray, a fellow from IBM, so they're well qualified to discuss this topic. I don't think many people have a really good view of what quantum actually is. So we did do a bit of a survey, asked people what they thought quantum actually was. The common answers, and maybe you guys can give us some clarity on this, was they came back with A, more expensive AWS computing, top answer. B was a replacement to faster classical computing. C, something only used by quantum physicists. And D, other.
Okay.
So, maybe I'll let you start, Ray. Are you able to give us a bit of an overview or put a bit of colour around what quantum computing actually is?
Absolutely. First, Jackie, thanks for having me here, and I'm happy to be here with you. It's very interesting that the top answer was completely unrelated to what quantum computing is, which is not uncommon. So, a few things about what quantum computing is and what it is. It is, so to be very specific to the choices you get, it is the answer B, which is other, which means that it is not faster classical computing. It is not just used by quantum physicists. It can be used by anyone. And in fact, at IBM, we do have about 25 of these quantum computers in the cloud that several million people have signed on to and have started to learn how to program and use quantum computers. So now to specifically answer the question of what is quantum computing, in classical computing, we talk about bits being 0 and 1. In quantum computing, you talk about qubits, which can take a value of 0 or 1, or a value in between 0 and 1. That's taking advantage of the quantum mechanical properties of qubits and manipulating them. The advantage being you can do a lot more in one bit than what you can do in a classical sense. That's the underlying structure of it. And you say, so what? What does that do, and why is it not faster classical computing? There are certain types of problems that quantum computing is good at solving, and there are certain types of problems it will not solve. You will not see a quantum computer solve your payroll problem, or run your claims management, or payment processing, whereas it can do optimization and simulation, and it can do factoring. So there are certain problems that it is good at solving. So quantum computing net-net is a different kind of computing paradigm that is extremely good at solving certain types of problems, and it is never going to replace classical computing. Classical computing and quantum computing will always work together in a hybrid model.
Dan, maybe I'll ask you, what's your initial reaction to what Ray has just explained about quantum computing?
Of course, I totally agree. I think the idea that quantum was going to come along and sort of take away classical computing was probably a misunderstanding from the beginning. I think a lot of, from a practitioner perspective, a lot of businesses are at this stage trying to work out what, applications or what business problems are best suited to quantum, and also trying to work out at what time in the development of quantum computing is it right to invest in actually putting those applications into a production state. Because we do know, obviously, with new waves of computing, there will be a point in time where it reaches the right sort of cost level, the right performance, the right stability, and I think my experience has been that we're still at this stage, certainly in our context, in the learn and understand what the problems are, rather than yet be heavily investing in applications.
Yeah.
Right.
Are you able to give any examples or context of where you have seen quantum being applied to business problems? Maybe Ray, if you start.
Yeah, there are two types of problems that I want to highlight, right? One is to address your problem, address your question of what kind of business problems are we solving. We typically can look at quantum computing as solving three types of problems. One is what we call simulating nature. What that means is you can model materials, new materials. So discovery of new materials is possible because now you're able to model existing materials and look at them in a three-dimensional way that a current classical computer simply doesn't have the capacity to do. Remember earlier I talked about quantum computing having, each qubit can take 3 values, whereas classical computing can take only 2 values, 0 or 1. The consequence of that is that enables us to model these molecules. The capacity to model these molecules is significantly higher than what a classical computing can. For example, even a coffee molecule cannot be modeled clearly using a classical computer because it simply runs out of capacity. Whereas you look at a quantum computer, it can not just model coffee, but model a number of other materials as well. So the impact of that is discovery of new materials. That is going to be a breakthrough when we begin to apply quantum in a large scale. So that's one use case.
I think most people are going to resonate with the coffee example.
Well, me too. I like a good, great cup of coffee, right? So no worries there. The second use case is in identifying patterns in complex data structures. Now, simply put, AI is a very good use case of that. You want to identify patterns with data that you have. That is very good. Quantum is very good for such use cases. The third use case is around optimization. So you can look at Monte Carlo simulation and running optimization on your portfolio, financial portfolio, or looking at liquidity management. These are clear examples where you can apply optimization algorithms and simulation techniques to come up with better ways of doing things. That is one side of the business value part of it, right? To call out the other aspect of it, there is one other interesting use case that quantum is good at solving, which is factoring. What I mean by that is if I gave you a number 65 and say, tell me the factors that make up 65, 13 and 5, you can easily come up with that. But if I were to give you, say, a 657-digit number and say, tell me the factors of that, you can do it. A classical computer cannot do it literally, even if it takes 1,000,000 years. That is a factoring problem, and all of our asymmetric cryptography, which is your communication mechanisms, right? HTTPS that people use. That is based on this notion of unable to find prime factors for a given number, right? Now, a quantum computer can solve that problem in a matter of hours because Peter Shor came up with an algorithm in 1994 to solve factorization. So that is a different kind of problem because it is a use case. Factoring a number is a use case. However, the impact of that is today. Because security that we currently know, love, and experience will break.
Sure.
Yeah. That's a bit.
I'm interested, Ray, just in how your customers are using it. I mean, you mentioned before that you've got a number of customers using quantum in cloud.
Yes.
Is this experimentation? Is this prime time? Is the mix of both?
To be very clear, right now we have, IBM has put out a quantum chip that has 433 qubits. Now, you may say, so what does that really mean? Is it big or is it small? Is it sufficient? Just to give you a perspective, 5 years ago we started off with 27 qubits. That was the first machine we put up on the cloud. Progressively we have gone from there to 433 last year, and this year we are looking at announcing a chip that is 1100 qubits big. So we have solved technical problems along the way, but still we haven't crossed over the threshold of when is a really quantum computer of suitable capacity and strength, when is it going to be available, right? So you typically need 100,000 qubits or more to do meaningful problems, to solve business problems. And we are looking at achieving that in the early 2030s. So you may have seen an announcement from Google, IBM, and the University of Tokyo talking about building a quantum computer with 100,000 plus qubits in the early 2030s. So that should give you a time horizon as to when we will have that kind of a machine available. Now, to answer your question specifically of what are clients using it for, primarily learning. So when I talked about millions of users, there are millions of users across the world who are using the free systems that we have to learn quantum computing as a new method of programming and building circuits in executing. Right? That's one. The second is we are also working with a number of clients in beginning to address the kinds of business problems I just talked about. I talked about liquidity management and fraud analysis and things of that nature. There are a number of clients who are across multiple industries, financial services being clearly an important one. They're addressing how they can build up their capability to solve business problems using quantum. So they're building algorithms that they can execute today on today's machine, but they haven't reached, the capacity isn't there yet for them to begin to apply it in solving real problems and achieving business value. But it's a few years down the road. But if they don't prepare themselves today, they're going to be caught behind, curve.
Yeah.
So that's why people are working on it now to solve real problems and preparing themselves to solve real problems.
Yeah. It's great. Thanks, Ray. Maybe over to you, Dan. In your view or experience, I know you have a lot of background also from your concept days in the Monte Carlo simulations and trading areas, but what are you seeing people doing in the industries, and where do you see the key kind of opportunities and risks around quantum?
I think, as Ray said, what I've seen a lot of these firms certainly learning and trying to understand where and how this does present either risks or opportunities. I think if you think about it from a large corporate or a large financial services, one of the key concerns will be, does this cause me any concern from a cyber perspective? Could data be, stolen now and decrypted later? Could we, be, so thinking through that and trying to design approaches which are sensitive to what might develop in the future in terms of capabilities, I think is certainly an area that I could expect banks to be interested. But in areas like portfolio management or Monte Carlo simulation or algorithmic trading, I can imagine that as the state of the technology matures, there would be potentially firms who would see alpha and the opportunity to perform more efficiently than their peers. And so wherever there's a competitive advantage, and we see this with waves of technology over time, those areas that seek to understand and learn from it, can benefit as long as they get their timing right and they've learned along the way.
If I may, Jackie, to pull on a thread that Dan, you called out about harvest now and decrypt later, right? I touched on this notion of factoring being fundamental for cryptography or security mechanisms, and that is potentially exposed with quantum computers. You may say, well, you talked about a quantum computer becoming available in 2030s. So I do have time between now and then to address my cryptography. The answer is yes and no. Yes, you do have some time to fix your core cryptography challenges and using the newer algorithms. However, one area where there is exposure today is in Dan what you called out as harvest now and decrypt later. Simply put, the notion is that bad actors can exfiltrate data today, encrypted data that can be exfiltrated today by bad actors with absolutely no means of decrypting it today. But that's okay. They will sit on it for 7 years, 8 years, 10 years, whatever time it takes, until a quantum computer with suitable capacity is available for them to go and decrypt it. And then they will find how they can monetize the information they have downloaded and plus have. So being very cognizant of what is sensitive, critical information or data for any enterprise is very important, so that you can safeguard it today from such harvest now and decrypt later attacks.
Yeah, that's an interesting scenario, because we all talk about the
it?
0 day. We all talk about the 0 day, threats.
Yeah.
But what if the data was kind of harvested now, and 2 years later it becomes an actual threat?
Yeah, and typically we find that there are, again, data that changes, every 2 years or so, maybe not that exposed, but patent information, engineering designs, pharmaceutical drug discovery information. I can go on and on about data that has time value over 7 years, 10 years, 15 years. And that is what is exposed today, and that's a concern. The other is typically corporations take anywhere from 5 to 7 years to overhaul. 5 is on the extremely aggressive side, to overhaul their existing cryptography. So if you now think about, if I have to replace existing cryptography with what is post-quantum cryptography, you're looking at a 5 to 7 year, if not more, time frame. And earlier I said we are looking at early 2030s to have a powerful enough quantum computer capable of breaking, decryption available. Now you're looking at waiting. I am at a spot where I should really begin doing something, or else it's going to be too late.
Yeah. So it sounds like the current real application is really on the risk management side. On risk management, we can't wait till 2030.
Right.
Are we seeing any practical, other than the cybersecurity example that you spoke through, or use case, are we seeing any practical applications of how quantum could be used to potentially identify different business threats or a threat, I guess, trading in the trading space? Any suspicious activity, anything like that, where we might actually use information that was detected through an algorithm as a risk, and we're seeing that actually acted on by the business?
Well, as I said, right now there are applications where certainly fraud detection and threat detection are areas where quantum can certainly help. However, to reinforce a point I made earlier, now all that we have are clients understanding how to build algorithms that they can execute to realize that potential and value. And given that right now we only have 433 qubits and we need a lot more to really apply that, there is still a few years' time before you can begin to see the actual implementation of quantum-based solutions of threat detection or fraud management or any of the other examples I talked about. So for actual application, a lot of our clients are working on building those specific algorithms. Typically, we work with clients on 1 or 2 use cases, two or three use cases, where they'll begin to learn as well as apply quantum for a business benefit. And many of them are in this risk analysis space that you talked about. So there is application, but the value of that is going to come later.
Mm-hmm. Anything you'd add to that from your experience, Dan?
No, I think Ray's spot on. At the moment, it's not really yet ready for application so much as learning and experimentation.
Yeah. Okay, so if there were like 3 key takeaways or pieces of advice you could give people in terms of what they should do now to kind of prepare for quantum, what would they be? Right?
One is, given the immediacy or time factor of the security challenges I talked about, the harvest now and decrypt later, and so that is one. I'll break that into 2. In that, one is make sure you identify as an enterprise, you have to identify what your crown jewel data is, and are you ready to protect it? Are you set up to protect it so that this harvest now decrypt later challenge can be mitigated? That's one. The second is, I'll also hone in on the other side of this, which is I talked about 5 to 7 year runway for corporations to upgrade their cryptography. Begin that process today. No need to be panicked about it, but you need to be planning to do that. So let's begin by doing an inventory and figure out where you are, and then there are approaches that we can walk you through that will help you begin your journey towards becoming quantum safe. That's the second. The third is, quantum is not just about security and this potential threat it poses. While that is an immediate use case, the benefits of quantum far outweigh the challenges that we see today. It's going to be a huge opportunity and create an inflection point 7 years, 10 years down the road. So begin preparing yourself for that by figuring out what the relevant use cases that you can take advantage of in that space, and begin building up that skill set, because this is going to be a game changer. I wish I were a student today going through college, because I really enjoy these new kind of breakthroughs, but great to be a part of it nevertheless.
So some good advice for parents.
And some very good advice for parents, right?
From my perspective, I think I really do agree with Ray's. I think maybe to your point about data, I think whether it's AI or cyber today as a risk, the thing is, as organisations, we do need to get, I think, much stronger in data governance, in not keeping data longer than we need to, not storing it in ways that could be potentially subject to threats which are evolving. And so I think maturing data governance and being really active and involved in that is good practice today and for the future. I do think when you're looking after prioritisation of time, we probably are in the learn phase in quantum, and by that I mean having a smaller part of your team that's available and aware to understand what the capabilities will be in the future, such that you can put that onto your roadmap and start to identify where it could potentially be applied. Those would be probably the key things that I would be thinking about.
So we're kind of watching the surf reports, but we're not quite ready to be getting out on the big waves yet.
Sorry.
Thank you both so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Jackie. I enjoyed it. And
Thank you.
that's great.